We are back, ladies and gentlemen, with, of course, TopRamen versus ECalipso, Terran versus Protoss. I know that the latest bout of replays have kind of been the TopRamen show, and obviously he's also played in his group, but that's just sort of the way that things broke down. I thought initially we'd have a little bit more time to cast those qualifying series with Neblime, but as of the time of recording, we haven't been able to cast those just yet. So that's something we will rectify and get those to you, albeit it'll be after the players who qualified played in their groups, but that's okay. That's the way it goes. Let's check out what happens in this Terran versus Protoss. We've got ECalipso in the bottom left. He is the Protoss challenger to step 2, the field. What more can we ask of the community about, well, okay, I say that and he's talking about Starcraft 2. You can't say it's like Starcraft 2. What, dude? Come on, bro. Give us a little bit more credit than that. Now, TopRamen in the top right maybe helps him out there a little bit with his feedback. If you guys can't figure it out based on the tone of my voice, I did just wake up. Having a little bit of coffee. And you know, I like me some coffee, so if you got some spares, pop it into the bottom right. There's a link there on the overlay. ECalipso definitely gives me energy as somebody who's played for a very long time and maybe back in the day. And he discovered this community by watching the castovers. So I'm sure he's happy to see all of the content there. His name in the lights, so to speak, already scoring a win in this series. And yeah, he's correct that Cosmonarchy is very different than Brood War. But I think it's also pretty different than StarCraft 2. It's so funny, because you get the Brood War people who think that there's some aspect of it that's similar to StarCraft 2, right? And then you get the StarCraft 2 people like Hepsea who come in and they're like, dude, you can't move your army automatically. The army doesn't just move. What the heck? This is bullshit. And you know, I'm obviously taking the piss a little bit, but it's cute, and it's interesting that you'll get people who say that it's like an in-between is basically the aggregate of their feedback when you pool the StarCraft 2 feedback, because they're weirded out by the Brood War stuff, and the Brood War people are like, oh wait, you can select more than one building at a time, and you don't have to select only 12 units at a time, and you know, that stuff like that, right? So anyway, just a little bit amusing on the feedback that we sometimes get. Always good to get more of it, even if you know, sometimes I'll react like, what? You say my life's work is like StarCraft 2? That Fisher-Price knockoff edition of StarCraft? I don't think so, buddy, but that's all right. There's plenty of stuff that we also disagreed with when it comes to Brood War, and we're trying to do something better than both games. Now, I have my own personal bias as to if I had to pick one of those two games, obviously I'd be picking Brood War, but doesn't mean that you can't do much better than it, and that's what we're trying to do here. Now, we have a little bit of a proxy developing for ECalipso, bringing that StarCraft 2 energy, perhaps. You know, you still see, you know, it's funny, because I watch a lot of pro play, and you still see some proxies from Protoss, but you don't see it nearly as much. You know, in the versus Terran matchup, sometimes you'll see like a full-blown proxy gate into, that's where they'll also put their Templar archives. So they'll put their Citadel of Adun in their main and their Templar archives by the proxy. So, you know, there's stuff like that can actually happen. What is ECalipso thinking? He's waiting for the money. What's he going to be throwing down here? Is it going to be a tech structure? A Stargate! Proxy Stargate! Okay. All right. I see how it is, ECalipso. We'll see what he wants to do with that. Now, this is going to cut into his army production. Now, thankfully for him, TopRamen's going for the macro build. I didn't really talk too much about his build, but he's gone for the Stockade into Quarry into Treasury. And he has an anchor for defense. He's going to wipe the Scribe. That's going to be the proxy man down. Okay. What does he want to do with the Stargate, though? I wonder. Like, oh yeah, he's... that's a carryover effect from StarCraft 1, as well as, I think, StarCraft 2. But yeah, the high ground is also what happens. So he's learning the mechanics. He's got a lot of money in the bank. I don't know if he's saving up for something specific, but he's definitely thinking about things. Corey on the way. That'll be the third worker production queue. You know, TopRamen, if you leave him alone, he scales so nicely into the mid-game, man. This Stockade is oddly placed for that rally, but that's all right. Not frustrating the pathway too much. I've been making it a point to complain about that wherever possible. Anytime I see this structure placement, I'm like, hey, what if I drop you and then your army gets caught trying to move through there? Because to the StarCraft 2 crowd's point, your army doesn't just move like a fluid line, right? So now I think that's a good thing, but it's something you got to play around for sure. Fulcrum on the way for TopRamen. That's going to be a pretty important piece here, but if he goes for the Palladiums, he won't actually have any anti-air. So that's a little interesting. And one thing I was just thinking about looking at the Gladius model is, I mean, we're planning on making some changes to it anyway, but the central sort of sphere of energy that he's got is it's kind of interesting. I feel like we could probably change that color when it's like empowering the balls nearby. But yeah, TopRamen discovered it based on the Jack Taco Cake game, so it's pretty cool. And yes, indeed, we have about 50 units per race. Terran has 52, Protoss has 49, and Zerg have 46, I think? I think 47 after the Zobriolus gets implemented at some point. And you know what? Eventually, Jack Yelansky, I mentioned his name. All of the money he wins with these prizes and these tournament games is going towards a bounty where he's going to pay... He's going to turn that into money that he's funding for the implementation of a new unit. So I guess eventually it'll be 48. But you know how it goes. And Protoss is going to get a couple more units, actually. They're going to go up to 52 pretty soon. The Watchdog has landed, funnily enough, but unlike Benno, ECalipso is going to go ahead and bop that. We did see the Mason Scout as well. So, that, you know, he gets a Scout. He sees that there's suspiciously little in the base. Because there's the Stargate building Gladiuses over here. I mean, he's got the Mavericks. They're not the best choice for this, but a stimmed Maverick squad can definitely do some damage there. It looks like the Gladiuses are going to meet up. So the proxy part was mostly just to hide the tech and not to, like, build it closer to the enemy's base. Although, technically, that will also be true. But the minimal amount of anti-surface defense from the one phalanx and the anchors and stuff is going to be enough here, I think, for TopRamen to hold. Because what can you realistically do in this situation when you have such little ground game? However, pivoting it over to the main with those Gladiuses, especially as the Atlas is coming down. Oh, we've got a Watchdog coming, but the timing is not going to be favorable here. ECalipso going to charge in, and he's going to immediately depower that Atlas. You're going to need to pull most of the Mavericks here, and it looks like only now is it revealed. He must have sensed something was up because he started to build the Watchdogs, and I feel like that's the right move here. It's like, okay, I'm definitely in, you know, suffering some situations here. I love moving forward to try to keep the channels going with the balls, but not going to happen. He does kill a good number of Masons, but he's still very much down in workers, right? You got to remember that that's where TopRamen does some of his best work, is getting that worker count high up. Now here is the limited impact that his ground game is going to have. You can see here that just the one anchor on the low ground and the anchor on the high ground along with the phalanx is enough to get rid of the front line. And when the front line goes away, you got to start falling back. This Atlas not been able to resume production. No more Watchdogs able to be put together. It looks like the 3 Gladiuses are unscathed, with the exception of one dropped down to about half health. And Mavericks don't really have the range to engage that, so you have to wait for the Gladiuses to already be committed and then stim underneath them. And it looks like, I mean, you know, TopRamen didn't have the right positioning there. He is going to switch into a Goliath, but only one Goliath, curiously enough, and probably go for the Starpad. The Antseal is a great choice versus small numbers of Gladiuses, because it essentially nullifies all the damage. And this Stargate isn't making anything after the first 3. It's going straight back into the Architect, tried and true pathway. I have a feeling that ECalipso watched a couple of the Hepsea versus Shambler games when there was PVTs on Germination. He probably figured out that the composition generally tends to be Striders, Mass Gateway units, right? And then, of course, Architects after. So taking a third base, stretching his legs, getting his economy, trying to take an advantage in the economy. Obviously, still behind workers, getting a captaincy. And that's the thing, is if you don't pressure the Terran early and they scale up, they will have more workers than you, and they can get up to this ridiculous engine of power where he's getting 3 captaincies, 2 more fulcrums, probably going to add on Palladium add-ons, and start pounding out tanks, non-stop phalanxes. I would say that TopRamen probably stands a pretty good chance of still being quite competitive here, but he doesn't have much scouting intel. You know, his one Watchdog wasn't very good. His Wraith is going to pop out. I say it wasn't very good. It did get a complete scout and definitely turned him on to the idea that there's something weird going on. The Gladiuses may have scouted up the... Yeah, they definitely scouted the Star Pet, so he's aware of drop potential and is indeed going to put down some static defense. It's actually an area where I think ECalipso faltered in the Derelict match, is he did not resolve the drops very well. And even this with, 2 Wardens, you can drop, 2 Trojans or 1 Trojan even full of Madcaps. You can probably clear out the Wardens, so got to be careful about that. Now, the Wraith does spot this base down here. We got the Engram, we got the Warden. Looking good there. Ministry coming for the 3rd base. So actually TopRamen is, still pretty much on track with regards to his economy. Obviously was slowed down a little bit. The timings for when you should have your 3rd base and stuff, we do not have any of that stuff solved yet. So it's worth pointing out. Well, it looks like the Wraith is going to get brought down to within an inch of its life. Gladiuses are going to be spotted here. A little bit of a cheeky stim. I don't know. I think the Wraith may have spotted the Stargate, but maybe not. I'm not 100% sure. Something was over there. I guess that was probably a vassal or something. Was it a vassal? Was it a witness? Did he have detection? Yeah, I guess it was the Ant Seal detected the witness. Okay. That's actually kind of big. 75 gas will pop those things. People keep saying nerf toss, but what if I buff them instead? Witness coming out. Does see the move out. Confirms that it is indeed over here. Now, playing on the defensive, I think, is not really that different than being on the offensive for Protoss versus Terran when this is the composition. But hey, you got to watch out here because the Engram... You don't want to engage on the defenses when the Architects are here. So this is where it is different, because you obviously have the support of the Wardens and the Engram, cracking shot after shot. There's no front line here for ECalipso. So he can, the fact that he can engage directly onto this is a boon that not normally is afforded to him based on his composition. And the Phalanxes are not targeting the Architects, which is a little bit of a whiff from TopRamen. He only had the 1 Ant Seal. So the commentary I was setting up there was if TopRamen just sieges here and waits for ECalipso to step to him and uses the artillery to kill the initial static defense in the safety of the, out of range of the Engram and stuff, then at that point ECalipso doesn't really have much of a recourse until he gets a good set of melee units. He's actually stacking his witnesses in the middle of the map. Has forgotten a little bit about them. Is going to just take a look over here and see that there is a 3rd base up and running. There's not really any splash potential here for the Masons, so it's not like there's an Acantor over here that you'd worry about. The Architects just have the missile split. They don't have a actual splash damage. So this is okay. I mean, he's still losing a lot. But honestly, they might have even just bought him a little bit of time to reposition. Madcaps here are going to be able to engage onto the Architects, and these are very expensive units to be losing if you're in ECalipso's shoes. But again, the Phalanx targeting not really on point for TopRamen. Definitely wants to take a look at that. Clerics healing up the workers that managed to make it over to the 3rd, and now ECalipso has a decided economic advantage. He's got his Ant Seal, or sorry, he's got his embassy up. I was going to say Ant Seal because that one looked like it was absorbing a little bit of damage. And yeah, we need to see a little bit more from the macro machine that TopRamen has sort of made a name for himself with, building a lot of units. Back at home, though, not really that much to go off of. We do have a 2nd prostration stage coming, the first one already being pumping up pariahs. That's going to be the heavy front line here. And I do think pariahs are a pretty good choice in that situation. Witness going to be zoned away by the Ant Seal, not exactly being picked apart. Wraith coming in just to see what's going on. Narrowly avoiding threading the needle for a lot of things, but it's going to reveal itself in a moment here, I think. Instantly bopped. And now the Gladius is activating again. These Gladius is the same ones as before. So, they're going to get some worker kills. ECalipso already up by 20 workers. This is just going to consolidate his advantage there. And actually, the worker production has been a little bit slowed by TopRamen. I think maybe he thought, oh, I don't need to make any more. Or maybe it just slipped his mind. Now he's going to go ahead and reactivate. But he is being raided over here. Going to have to pull all of these boys. He had the bridge control, but didn't really have any units stationed over here. And again, didn't really have that much map control. Despite seeing the army on the other side of the map, he then didn't really have any opportunity to push through. So he's definitely no longer... For a while now, he's not been favored in the matchup. I would say... He held on surprisingly well versus the Gladiuses, despite not having any of the tech for it. And now it's up to ECalipso if he wants to try to pivot for that. It looks like not. He's going to exit through the wide ramp. Yeah, this base is very, very difficult to hold with the changes, right? I mean, you think about it. This wide ramp over here, this wide ramp over here, you got to defend it quite well. And over here instead is where you might want to target, especially since that's where the Stargate is. Not that it's been used, but, it's just another asset that you can see. I thought maybe those were workers, but no, just a minimal amount. Now starting to peel off some from the natural. Again, he doesn't really have that many, right, to peel off in the first place. Taking a 4th base. ECalipso looking like he's setting the control, setting the pace. Definitely feels like he's the one who is deciding the destiny of this match. And I gotta say that's pretty impressive from that respect, right? Like, TopRamen is a player who so far has been the kind of guy who, if you don't take the fight to him, if you don't set that pace, you will end up like losing to the macro, losing to how many units he can make. And even in that Derelict game, there's a lot of back and forth. It was very much, you know, TopRamen's to decide for quite a while. And we saw how it ended up falling apart for him. A little bit of overconfidence in the military in a couple of places. Probably just based on inexperience, right? Like they're both saying today, they only just got into this game about a week ago. ECalipso, on his first day, is definitely floating a good amount of money. That's something that sneaks up on people when you take so many bases, and then you only have 10 production facilities, which it doesn't work in Starcraft 1, right? You go up to like 30 gates, not 30 gates, but a large number of gates. Maybe actually you would go up to something like that in the heavy macro. Anyway, frontline gonna engage onto this army. The pariahs in such a count, thanks to the double prostration stage. And the architect's still in a healthy enough situation here. There was never enough bio built up. And there's just so many, only clearing the front line when he's already across the bridge and through the whole concave. There's not that many forces set up over here. We've got 2 phalanxes and a couple madcaps, but they are not in a position to defend the 3rd base, and it is all important right now. In the hole, in the deficit. And look at this, the architects, they're in such a number, and there's not really anything to stop them. No Gorgons out. In fact, was there any tier 2 besides the captaincies? Doesn't really look like anything was used. He never made any sentinels. Never entrenched in any positions. So TopRamen is definitely in... it was on the back foot for a while. I think it's basically over at this point. Losing this base, I don't know how he's going to be able to step on from this. Or if he's going to at all. He's got the stockade floating around, but... I mean, we're talking about 4-base ECalipso. Getting that Protoss arsenal in real solid shape. We got 16 Zealots back at home. Looks like the prostration stage animations don't reset when the unit's done, which is a little funny. I'll fix that later. But yeah, I mean, pretty good stuff from our newcomer Protoss. TopRamen definitely not like an easy opponent to deal with, but this particular game, I think maybe he is running up against Protoss when he hasn't really done that much hitherto. I think his only experience TVP previous to this might have been playing against the Shambler and just having a bunch of 4-gate all-ins, or not really all-ins, I guess, but heavy focus on the military and not very heavy focus on the macro. He's going to have a good number of phalanxes out from his 3 fulcrums, but it's not going to be enough, especially as the Zealots start to descend upon it. We get the nice little finish at the end. This day, proxy Stargate not really coming into play at the end of the day. And the stockade down in the bottom, just scouting the natural, seeing how messed up he is. He makes 1 Huracan for good measure. Gets back down to the muscle memory, but his natural is broken. Perhaps so too is his spirit. The highlight matches here. ECalipso charging up. He's going to go ahead and finish this off in style. Even get an Optecton out for good measure. And yeah, GG asking for more games. Of course they want more games. And I don't know if ECalipso knows what Re is. I would imagine he does. And there it is. 1 more. All right. I'm not sure what the fate of that particular match was. It was not submitted to me. But that is going to conclude the coverage of this particular matchup. It was a little bit one-sided, but I do think that TopRamen showed good initial fortitude going up against the Gladiuses, something that he's probably not faced before, and something that I wouldn't necessarily advise, but it was cool to see ECalipso get cheeky with it, and the reaction wasn't like he went really hard on the Watchdogs after that, which maybe you can even criticize and say, what if there was an air-based follow-up? But he kind of scouted around and figured out, like, okay, you're mostly investing in gates and architects and stuff, so I know that you're not really using that Stargate that much. Not sure if he ever really found it until the stockade flew over. I thought maybe the Wraith would have seen it, but At the end of the day, he didn't end up bopping it. It stayed alive until the end of the game. And that's also a little bit of information, right? You know that from that position from the Stargate, ECalipso knows that your third base or fourth base, as it were, in that particular game it would have been, was never actually taken. Gives him a little bit more info, a little bit more map control. There's something psychological that happens when the whole map is dark except for your base. And that should be a big warning sign at any stage of the game except for the very beginning. Like, at any point, if I can give a general piece of advice to anybody playing, scouting is so important because there's so many units, so many different strategies your opponent can be making. I would say, and many people agree, that it's more important than the other StarCrafts that maybe some of these players are coming from. But it was obviously very important then. So what do you do in that situation? You scout your opponent, you try to figure out what they're up to. And, TopRamen did have a couple of moments where he did that with the Watchdog Scout, the Masonry Scout, obviously eventually the Wraith, and then inevitably the Stockade that floated out. And that's great, it's a good use of your structure to move around. It moves a little bit faster than in stock StarCraft. But also, I'd also just throw out another position there that if you can deny your opponent scouting by destroying his proxy structures in this case, or just, picking off the units in your various locations, you add more question marks. You don't really know. There's an information vacuum that starts to develop at that point, and you don't really know what's going on. So that's important, something to keep in mind. That's also going to close us out. So thanks for joining us for this episode of Cosmonarchy Casts. Obviously, these are daily. You can stay subscribed. You can check us out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern, or whenever you happen to find the video. And that will do it. GG's.